Hi everyone, it's Elana Miller here with the Psychiatry Mentor. I'm about to go live for the first night of my advanced Your Next Level Practice workshop. So we're going to be talking about architecting your ideal practice. Let's go ahead and get started. Hi everyone. I hope everyone's having a good evening. I'm going to let people filter in. I'm live streaming here on YouTube to make sure that camera is set up properly. Awesome. Let's go ahead and get started. We already got almost 50 people in the room here. I think about 500 of you registered, so it was a really good group. Let's share my screen. All right, well, welcome to night one of my advanced private practice workshop, Your Next Level Private Practice, Advanced Strategies for Profit, Efficiency, and Expert Positioning in Your Integrative Psychiatry Private Practice. So sessions are recorded and you'll be sent a link to the recordings after each session. And that link though is gonna expire on March 12th at 6 p.m. PST. The reasoning is that we want you to participate, watch the sessions, get something out of them, not just save them on the back burner to watch sometime in the future. So what to expect, I already released recordings of my December Private Practice Accelerator workshop. So those are already re-released. We had turned them off a week or so after the workshop. Those are re-released, so if you wanna watch back how to start a psychiatry private practice, that's what I talked about in that workshop. Tonight, we're gonna be doing session 1, Architecting Your Ideal Practice. Tomorrow, I'm going to be talking about the art of advanced integrative and functional psychiatry. And in session 3 on Thursday, we'll be talking about reposition, repackage, and raise your rates, the path to a premium practice. Most importantly, though, we're going to be talking about what do you do when you have a practice but it's not working? How to break through growth plateaus, refine your strategy, and optimize your practice for greater impact, efficiency, and profitability while overcoming the mindset blocks that keep you from scaling to the next level. And why am I doing an advanced version of the Private Practice Accelerator? I've done, my main introductory workshop for starting a practice 3 or 4 times now, and people really like that one. But the reason is that people misunderstand and don't realize that in Dream Practice Academy, we and my team work with practitioners at every stage of building a practice. Yes, we help people who are starting from scratch. We have a very linear system for starting the practice, getting your minimum viable practice going, differentiating yourself, getting your unique selling proposition going. But my personal favorite is working with people who have existing practices and helping optimize them. The reasoning is that you already have some momentum, and the strategy around optimizing an existing practice is very linear. It's very honestly math-based, which I really like. It's not emotional. It's cold, hard math of where your revenue is coming in and how you optimize. And so I really like working with people who have existing practices. So this workshop this week is to demonstrate to you a little taste of how I help people who have existing practices optimize them. Just a very brief introduction, since you all probably know who I am. My name is Elana Miller. I'm an integrative psychiatrist. I have a private practice in Los Angeles called Zen Psychiatry. I received my undergrad degree in psychology from Harvard. I graduated AOA honors from USC Medical School, Keck School of Medicine, and I did my psychiatry residency training at UCLA. I'm a 2-time cancer survivor, and I'm the founder of Dream Practice Academy, and I'm a career mentor for 200 plus, I think it's almost 300 now, psychiatrists and psych NPs who have started successful private practices. What inspired me to become a mentor was a sincere desire to help elevate other practitioners and help them reach the patients they were born to help. I truly feel that if I help you reach patients you wouldn't have otherwise been able to reach because you didn't have maybe the marketing or business savvy, that I'm indirectly helping those patients that you will one day help, that you always had the clinical skills to help, but I'm helping you reach them. So without further ado, let's get started on architecting your ideal practice. So drop questions and comments in the chat. I'm going to do a Q&A at the end. The Q&A feature itself is disabled. So today's session, we're going to cover how to complete a private practice audit, how to identify inefficiencies, optimize revenue, and streamline your workflow. We'll talk about setting boundaries and saying no, how to confidently say no and enforce limits with patients and discharge misaligned patients. And then lastly, how to eliminate, automate, and delegate administrative tasks in your practice and create systems that free up your time. And I did it in this order for a very specific reason, which is that you do the private practice audit, you realize all the problems that you have, and then there are usually two limiting factors for solving those problems. One is the logistical hurdles of what do you actually do, but the second piece is the emotional hurdles of you know what you should do, you know you just have to set some limits with some patients, and you're afraid to, you don't know how. So that's why I'm covering both of those things. If you have an existing practice, you probably have some problems, but you also have an opportunity. Where you are right now, you have an established practice, you're making some money, you've proven that your services are valuable and that patients want them, you know there's potential to grow. However, you're basically drowning in the day-to-day work of your practice, right? You're constantly juggling patient care, admin work, and daily operations. Your practice is kind of running, but it's running you. Instead of you having a boss, you have like 50 bosses and they're your patients. And it's opposed to you having control over the operation. And you don't probably feel like you have any time to stop and analyze what's working and what's not, what's possible. You're just trying to like get through the day. So the opportunity though, is that your practice is already in motion. You're not starting from scratch. You have patients, you have revenue, you have some momentum. So a few small tweaks can lead to really big results. Think of it like a car going 60 miles an hour down the freeway. You're flying down the freeway. Any little amount of steering can dramatically change the direction of where you end up. As opposed to if you're barely moving, and this is like someone who's starting their practice from scratch, you're barely moving. It doesn't matter how much you're steering. It's not really significantly changing the direction that you're going. You have to be going faster. So if you're going really fast, just some very minor tweaks can give you a massive return on investment. And so you're closer than you think. These right tiny little adjustments, streamlining systems, shifting your strategy, and optimizing your approach can quickly transform your practice, and it doesn't take that long. That's why I really like working with these types of people in Dream Practice Academies, because we do a couple of things and a month later, you're off to the races. It doesn't take 3 to 6 months to just get going. The first step is you must do a complete private practice audit. You have to truly understand the problem in order to solve it. And you cannot skip this step. What I'm about to show you will take you hours, if not days of dedicated time to truly do correctly. However, it is an absolute required step in order to be able to get anything else out of anything else that I'm going to be talking about the rest of this session or in the sessions in the next couple of days. What is a private practice audit? It's a deep dive into your practice's fundamentals so that it reveals those inefficiencies, those hidden opportunities, and the areas for growth. It helps you in a linear, rational, non-emotional, not gut instinct way identify what's working, what's not, uncover gaps in revenue, time management, and patient mix, pinpoint where you're losing time and money, and create a clear path to working smarter and not harder. How it works. It's broken into 3 key areas, and we're going to go over all 3 of these areas. One is a patient panel audit. You're going to evaluate your entire patient panel based on revenue, workload, and fit. 2 is an hourly rate audit to understand what you're actually earning per hour. Because most people, when they have an existing practice, whether it's cash or insurance, if it's insurance, every insurance is reimbursing a different rate. If it's cash, you probably have patients at different rates. And you probably don't even really know exactly what you're making. You have an idea of what you're charging different patients, but you don't know what the average is unless you calculate it. 3 is an admin work audit. And this is tracking where your non-clinical time goes to identify those tasks that you can either eliminate, get rid of, automate with software, or delegate to an assistant. And we're going to go through a worksheet that walks you through each step. So let's go ahead and screen share it. Now, my team's going to drop this link in the chat. You're going to get this for free as part of participating in this workshop. What you're seeing is a read-only copy. You have to go to File, make a copy, and that's the one that you guys can edit. So I'm going to go over the hourly rate edit first because it's a little bit more simple, and we'll circle back to this. But what you're going to do for the last 12 months of your practice, or less if you've been in practice for less than 12 months, is put down what your revenue was for each month, your gross revenue, not, forget about expenses, that's a whole other thing. Your gross revenue, your number of patient appointments, so like the total number of patient appointments you had that month, and then the number of patient hours, like clinical hours you worked that month. So for example, if you have, it's all therapy, this is going to be 1-to-1, versus if you have some med management and maybe you do 2 med management appointments in an hour, then that'll be like, 2 appointments, right? And this will auto calculate your effective hourly rate. And you're going to do this for as many months as you can. Then it's going to automatically add up, and it will auto calculate your average effectively hourly rate. So let me just show you an example. Let's say I just put in 12,000. I'm only going to put in a number of patient hours, so that's what it's calculated based on. And I worked, 40 hours. It auto calculates your average hourly rate. And then once you do it over the course of at least a couple of months, you get a good average number. Now let's go over the patient panel rate. And the reason you want to know your average hourly rate is you at least know what you need to charge to make more than you're making now, right? You know the patients that you're charging less than your average are the ones you probably need to raise your rates on or pitch on additional services, etc. We'll talk more about those opportunities on Thursday. Now let's go over the patient panel audit. I got this idea from a book called The Pumpkin Plan. We're going to talk more about this book on Thursday. But essentially the idea is you want to export a list of every single, in the book it's clients, for us it's patients that you're working with. And you can do this really with most of the EHRs. Go export a CSV file of all of your patients. And if you can, include the financial data of like what you're charging that patient and what your year-to-date revenue is. If your merchant account is set up, if it's integrated with your EHR, you can probably export that information together. But if not, you might have to manually export it from your merchant account and then match it up with your patients. You can see why this is going to take you hours, if not days, right? So you copy and paste all of your patients, leave the action step column blank. Hourly rate is either what you're charging that patient, or if it's insurance, what you're getting reimbursed. If you have an insurance practice, you should add a column that shows what insurance it is. Is it Blue Cross Blue Shield? Is it Aetna? If you're working with platforms like Grow and Alma, for example, put the platform if you're working with more than one. Then put your year-to-date revenue. That's the amount of revenue you made from that patient in the last 12 months. Obviously, it's going to be less frequent you're seeing that patient. It's going to be more if you've been seeing that patient for a long time. If you're seeing a patient weekly, but you just started seeing them a month ago, it's not going to be that much. So you're also going to, in this column, put your revenue potential. And this is just a 1 to 5 number. 5 is like is a therapy patient, weekly or every other week therapy patient. 4 is monthly or less, but a therapy patient. 3 is a med management patient in early treatment, so you're seeing them probably more frequently every couple of weeks or every month or so. 2 is a stable med management patient that you might only be seeing every 3 to 6 months, versus 1 is basically a med management patient you almost never see, who's maybe lost to follow-up. Like oh gosh, I haven't seen this patient in 9 months. Now what you're gonna do, and this may seem crude, but it's not about judging your patients, it's about aligning fit, right? Patients who you don't like working with, it doesn't mean that they're bad people. It means it's not a fit. Maybe you don't have the skill set to work with them, or it's just emotionally and personality not a good fit, and you'll be better served if you free them, and they'll be better served if you free them, okay? So I don't want you to think this is we're judging people, but it's calculating, it's a cold rational calculation of how much do you like working with this person and how aligned are you? And I have 4 categories here that you're going to give them a score. And I have the key here. And those 5 areas are, to what degree they respect boundaries. This column 2 is history/stability. And I put those in one column because history is how long you've been working with someone. Stability is how stable they are. So even if someone's kind of chaotic and unstable, if you've been working with them for years, you know what to expect. It's probably not so stressful. Versus someone who's very chaotic and unstable and you just started working with them, that's a little bit more challenging. Enjoy work is just a gut check. Like when you wake up in the morning and you see this person on your schedule, are you excited or do you have a sinking sense of dread in your stomach? Ancillary work is how much additional work outside of sessions there is for this patient. And this isn't an issue of someone pushing boundaries. It's just an issue of like someone's on stimulants. Excuse me, let me take a sip of my tea here. Someone's on stimulants. You only see them every month because they're really, you only see them every 3 months because they're really stable. You're not going to make them come to you every month, which I think is reasonable. But you do have to refill their stimulant monthly because you can't, put refills on it. That's a little bit of ancillary work. Someone who's a student and you have to fill out, paperwork for them for their school on a regular basis, that's some ancillary work. So that's the other score. This will, if you put it as a percentage, the total score will auto calculate, okay? So again, this will take you like a day, 8 hours straight or more if you're actually doing it correctly to export all that data. But once you do it, you have cold hard numbers and it becomes very clear what to do next. Let me just briefly show the next part of the audit, which is more straightforward, but requires some work. Is anything when it comes to optimizing systems, it's always easier and takes less time in the short run to just get through your day. It takes more time to do something like this, but you do it once and then you save a lot of time in the long run. So it does require a little bit of a commitment. But for the 1 week admin audit, for 1 week, if not 2 weeks, every single administrative task you have to do in your practice, not clinical care, not charting, because you do charting for every patient, it's basically the same. You record it. You put down the patient, the date, the patient, if the patient contacted you, how they contacted you, what the request was, and then what you did. Leave the solution column blank. And at the end of the 2 weeks, you circle back and it starts to become really obvious of like, oh, half of my administrative time is rescheduling patients. If I just change to auto scheduling, that's going to be an incredibly low hanging fruit, high yield thing I can do. It basically helps you triage your time of in what order should you be optimizing your systems? What systems would give you the highest yield in terms of saving you time versus what doesn't really matter that much because it doesn't actually take up that much time. This seems obvious, like, oh, I don't need to do this, I already know. Trust me, you don't. I did this myself and it just puts in cold, stark reality what's actually taking up so much of your time, and you might be surprised. You could even actually, and I might recommend this, add a column and say how much time that thing took you. 5 minutes, 20 minutes, and then you can even sort and add up what's taking up the most time, reverse sort from like A to Z, and helps you prioritize what administrative tasks you're going to tackle first. I'm going to show you an example. And this is from someone in Dream Practice Academy whose private practice audit I recently reviewed. And you'll see why I like doing this so much, because I like numbers, I like spreadsheets. I copied her audit and I removed all the patient names, so I'm not sharing any like protected data. But let me show you. This is someone who has an insurance practice, okay? And she is transitioning it to cash. That seems like a really straightforward thing of like, oh, you just announce the transition. But you can be really strategic about how you do it, meaning that you don't have to immediately uncredential from, 20 insurances. Find out the insurances that are reimbursing the least or that are associated with the patients you like working with the least. And then uncredential from those ones first, send out the transition letters, and it's the lowest stakes, right? You're making the least amount of money from that insurance anyway, so that if those patients don't come with you in the transition, it's not as big of a deal, so that you can kind of refine your approach over time. And it's also not a big hit to you financially. So you can see there's multiple tabs here. This is what she gave me. She gave me sheet 1. What I did was duplicate sheet 1 a bunch of times and sorted the information in different ways. So she has an insurance practice. She works with multiple of those platforms, and then within those platforms, multiple insurances. And then she put kind of the total claims, dollar amount of the claims for those patients, and then the average value per claim. And like, I think this is like the dollar amounts, and then she averaged them. So she put a ton of data, and so it gave me a lot to work with. First thing I did is I color coded it, and I sorted it by company. So we have Alma, and then these are the Aetna patients, Alma and the Cigna, Alma and the UHC, etc. Grow and Aetna, Grow and Blue Cross Blue Shield. What this allowed me to do was to calculate the average reimbursement per insurance per company, as well as the total value of that insurance, meaning that if you have a lot of patients under that insurance and you're seeing those patients more frequently, the total value is going to be higher. Then what I did is just to clean it up, I hid these columns so that you can, and sorry, let me go back. I hid those columns, and then I duplicated this twice, and I sorted it in two different ways. First, I sorted by the average value per claim, so you can see which insurances are reimbursing the most. And look at the difference between the highest reimbursement per claim versus the lowest. I think this is private practice, so let's just take Sondermine Aetna. It's almost 3 times more, the highest, meaning that even if you have an insurance practice and your goal is to just optimize that insurance practice, you may be able to like double your income by being strategic about getting rid of some insurances and then marketing more toward patients with only certain insurances. So anyway, I by this I could see like, okay, her top 10 reimbursing insurances are these. Great. Now though, I sorted by the total value per claim, because you can see these are the top in terms of the average value per claim, but in terms of total value, the vast majority of her revenue is coming from Grow and Blue Cross Blue Shield. Even though the average reimbursement is not the highest, most of her money is coming from here. So she should absolutely keep that insurance. She should not get rid of that insurance first. Similarly, Sondermine and TriWest doesn't have the top reimbursement, but she has 23 patients at that insurance. If she were to transition, she could potentially lose more patients versus starting with some of these insurances where the total amount she's getting from them over the course of the year is lower. It's kind of lower stakes. Based on this, what I did was I put together this spreadsheet, and I said, these are the insurances you should keep for now. These are the ones that have the highest value per claim. These are the ones that have moderate reimbursement, but a high total value of the patients because you have a lot of patients in them, versus these are the ones that you should immediately drop because you only have a couple of patients at them and they're reimbursing poorly. So this would not hit her income significantly, and also allow her to test out her approach and how she's announcing the transition to her patients. Now, I also made some recommendations on what she should do with her patient panel. So she let me go back here. She put in this in terms of letter grades. What I did was I changed that to percentages. I added a column that summed it up or gave an average, and then I reverse sorted so that then I selected the highest rated patients in green, and then the lowest rated in red. And when you do this, it just makes it incredibly clear. Like I'm sure if you all exported a list of your patients and you reverse sorted them by once you have these rankings, these patients are probably causing you 99% of your daily headaches. If you just either set these patients free and send them to a provider who's better equipped to help them, or just set some boundaries with them, how much easier would your life be? Similarly, if you just identified what these patients had in common and marketed to them more, like advertised to them better, marketed to them better, and got more patients like them, how much would that improve your practice's bottom line? That's what we're going to be talking more about on Thursday. All right, let me go back to the slides. Now, let's say you've completed this audit and it's told you some unavoidable truths. What's the next step? There's 2 steps. One is you need to plug the holes. Like there's some obvious administrative inefficiencies and probably some misaligned patients that you notice right away. That's what we're going to talk about, plugging the holes today. There's also step 2, which is leveraging the opportunities, and that's what we'll be talking about in a few days. when people do this, it becomes really obvious that you need to let some patients go, or that you need to set some boundaries. But that feels scary, right? So people avoid it entirely. You can do it though, and I'm going to teach you how right now. Why psychiatrists struggle with setting boundaries? Because we have these misconceptions, these misaligned beliefs that it's selfish to say no. I entered this field to help people. Setting limits feels wrong. Or you're afraid that patients will get mad at you. You fear conflict. You fear getting a bad review. Or so you're just like, I can't set this boundary. Or you fear it will ruin your relationships with patients, that setting that boundary is going to create resentment. And you like your patients. You don't want to hurt their feelings or make them feel bad, so you feel like you can't. Or you have this belief that only bad patients need boundaries. I think there's this, the word boundaries kind of has a bad rap. It's like, oh, I set boundaries, I'm going no contact. I just think that's a very immature way to look at boundaries. Boundaries are about respecting yourself, but also respecting the other person and being direct with them with what you need. Like, don't expect people to read your mind, right? Like, we're psychiatrists, we tell patients that, but sometimes we don't act that way. I think it's a sign of respect to be direct with someone. You don't have to be unkind when being direct. You can say it kindly, but being just clear and letting the patient know what you need. They may do it or they may not, but at least you gave them the chance to do what you're needing, as opposed to like just secretly harboring resentment and then it leaks out in the treatment relationship in a really unproductive way. The reality is that setting boundaries is not about rejecting patients. It's about providing the best care possible while protecting your own well-being. Boundaries are easier than you think, and they're essential for your growth. Think of it this way. How can you really, especially if you're doing therapy, how can you effectively do therapy and counsel patients through difficult relationship issues if you yourself can't say those simple things that you're thinking in your head? If you don't overcome that with yourself, you're going to struggle with actually being effective with your patients, and you're going to be subconsciously counseling them to be avoided because that's what you're doing yourself. Versus if you gain confidence in this area, you help instill confidence in your patients that they can do it too. I was deeply inspired by these two books. I recommend you buy them. If you end up joining Dream Practice Academy in the little launch period we have, I'm going to give them to you for free. So if you're thinking about joining, maybe wait on buying them until you've made a decision on that, because I think they're so valuable. I want people joining my program to have them. I'm going to tell a brief story that's from the book Boundaries. The book Boundaries it has kind of like a Christian bent, and I'm not Christian, I'm Jewish. If you're not Christian, just put that aspect to the side. But I thought it was really interesting because it talks about boundaries from the perspective of being like a good Christian or good person, where people who are Christian believe it's wrong to say no. And so he's speaking to those people, which I think actually aligns a lot with us as psychiatrists, where it's part of our identity to be nice and to be good. And so we struggle with saying no. Imagine that you have a house, maybe you do have a house, and you have a lawn. And you have neighbors, they have lawns too. And your sprinklers are broken and they're watering your lawn, and they're also watering your neighbor's lawn. And your neighbor notices this and turns off his sprinklers because you're watering his lawn. So you're like, go over them. You want to fix your sprinklers, but you want to make sure his lawn is going to get watered. So you go over there and you say, hey neighbor, I noticed your sprinklers are off. Mine are broken, they're watering your lawn, but I'm going to get that fixed. Do you mind just turning your sprinklers on so they water your own lawn? I would appreciate it. Yeah, sure, no problem. A week later, the sprinklers are still not on. Now you're getting a little annoyed. You go over there. Hey neighbor, I mentioned about the sprinklers? I'd really, really appreciate it. It's using a lot of water. I'd really appreciate it if you could water it yourself, because then I can fix my sprinklers. Oh yeah, totally sorry. I've just been really busy. I'll do that right away. Great. A week later, they still haven't done it. So now you go back and now you're like fuming. Hey neighbor, I said, turn on your sprinklers. You're driving me crazy. It's a whole argument. You're the one who's being crazy though, going over there, asking repeatedly for someone to turn on their sprinklers when you just need to fix your own sprinklers so they stop watering your neighbor's lawn. Then your neighbor's lawn is going to turn brown, and then your neighbor's going to turn on their sprinklers or not. But either way, they make a decision and they experience the consequences, and then they make a decision that works for them. But this story seems stupid, like, oh, of course I would never do that. But this is essentially what we do in all of our relationships with patients, with family, with friends. We get really like indignant. Hey, you need to respect my boundary. You need to take care of this. But then we act in a way that we're constantly rescuing them, and we're preventing them from experiencing the consequences of their choices. So it's a little bit painful, but what you have to do is let people experience the consequences of their actions, and then they will decide if they want to do something about it or not. But either way, that's their choice as an adult. So the first step is, with those patients that are like feel really misaligned, is just sit on it, meditate on it, reflect on it, and ask yourself, what would need to be true for you to feel it's manageable to continue seeing this patient? You're probably annoyed, well, they're always late and they keep changing their Adderall dose on their own, and they're always paying late and this and that. I'm like, okay, great. So you would want them to not change, to take the medication as you're prescribing it. You'd want them to be on time, and you'd want them to follow your treatment recommendations. Yeah. Okay, great. So tell them that. Like, it sounds really obvious, but a lot of the times when I'm coaching people on this, they haven't directly said it to the patient. They assume the patient should know, or they assume like, oh, it was in my office policies. People don't read your office policies. And I'm speaking from experience as a psychiatrist who works with patients. Also, in Dream Practice Academy, you sign terms of service when people join. People don't read the terms of service, and you all are psychiatrists and you're professionals. So let's all be honest. People don't read things, right? So you have to lay it out clearly in your office policies, and then also repeat it verbally. Now, what will happen next is they won't listen to you. Oh yeah, sure, neighbor, I'll fix my sprinklers, and they won't do it. So then what do you do next? Well, you follow the 4-step process for setting boundaries. And what this is not is secretly harboring resentment and then exploding. You don't do that. You want to gradually escalate your communication in a non-emotional, rational way. People don't listen to what you say, they listen to what you do. So a verbal boundary without consequences is meaningless. Again, if you're just like yelling at your neighbor to fix their sprinklers, but you're not fixing your sprinklers, what you're saying is, hey, fix your sprinklers, but I also am going to keep watering your lawn, so if you don't, it's going to be fine, right? Be really aware where your words are not matching up with your actions. If you keep bailing someone else out, then you're basically telling them, you can keep doing this and I'm going to keep fixing it for you. So step 1 is you set the frame. Like, hey, this is my expectations. That's like your office policies. Step 2 is the first time the person crosses it, you say it out loud. Oh yeah, my cancellation policy is 24 hours, so I charge if you cancel within 24 hours. The next time they do it, you reinforce the boundary and you verbalize the consequence. Hey, you have to cancel with 24 hours. If you don't, then I charge the full fee. And then step 4 is you enact the consequence. But by the time you're enacting the consequence, you've said the boundary 3 times. And that's where people get tripped up, is you have to have a little bit of patience. When I have a patient who's crossing a lot of boundaries, in my head, I'm geared up for like a 3-month process where I'm going to wait it out. I'm going to wait for them to cross it, and then I'm going to patiently say it. And and then I know they're going to do it again. I'm going to patiently wait. Then they're going to do it again. And then I'm going to say it and say the consequence. The idea is that by the time you actually enact the consequence, they're not surprised. Like, wait, what? Really? I had no idea. Like, sometimes they'll still say that even if you said it 3 times. But you genuinely want the person to know what your expectations are and you're not catching them off guard. So I'm going to walk you through this 4-step process with 2 specific examples that are going to happen a lot in a practice. So let's take dealing with patients who miss appointments and it's affecting their treatment. Like, they're either missing appointments entirely or they're chronically late and you barely have time to talk about what's important, and then the appointment's over. Setting the frame is just mentioning it. How often are patients late and you just, oh yeah, no problem? What you're communicating is that it doesn't really matter. Now, I'm not nitpicky on this. The first probably 2 times a patient's late, I don't say anything, like, because I'm late sometimes. I mean, every once in a while, there's an extenuating circumstance. If it happens twice, then the next time I'm not making a big deal of it. I'm just saying, oh yeah, what happened? I'm at least demonstrating to the patient I'm aware they're late, and making them kind of explain at least shows that I'm curious, like it matters in some way. The next time, what I will say is, oh yeah, I'm so late. Oh yeah, no worries, like it's okay. Like I've noticed this happening a couple of times, it just means we can't get as much out of our sessions if you're late. Oh yeah, no, I know, I'll be on time next time. And I leave it there. I know it's gonna happen again, but I leave it there. The next time, I reinforce the boundary, and now I'm verbalizing the consequence. Hey, so now this is really happening a couple of times. If this continues happening, blah, blah, blah is the consequence. Now use your judgment. Maybe the consequence is that we may have to, consider pausing treatment until you're really ready to engage in this process. Or I'm not going to be able to prescribe your controlled substance anymore if we're not doing the therapy to teach you the coping skills for us to be able to get you off of it. Or like if it's a therapy patient, I'm not prescribing anything, I might just say, hey, if you're always late, we're probably not going to be able to make the kind of progress you want to make. Now, the last time is enacting the consequence, which is doing the thing you said in 3. Pausing treatment, discharging the patient, or if it's like that therapy patient example, what I more often do is I just let it happen. And maybe months go by, and then I wait for the patient to say something like they're disappointed they're not making progress. And then I'll say, yeah, I know. Remember 3 months ago when I mentioned about you being late all the time? Like, this is what happened. Do we want to change this dynamic and have you come on time so we could really make some progress? Oh yeah, you're right. Either way though, they experience the consequence, not me. I'm not fretting. I'm not sitting there with anxiety. Oh my God, they're late, and I still have to prescribe their Xanax, and I'm so stressed out. Like I feel manipulated. No, there's no emotion. I'm calmly waiting it out. It's calm for me, and I'm just verbalizing to them the steps. And then by the time I enact the steps, no one's surprised. Let me give you another example. Dealing with patients who call or email too frequently between appointments. And there's a little bit of nuance here because I'm not a stickler about this, especially early in treatment where patients reasonably have like questions. You're starting medications, you're changing things. Yeah, if you just have a quick question, I'm just going to answer it for you over email. I'm not going to charge you for that, or I'm not going to make you come in for a 20-minute appointment for something that's going to take me 1 minute. But it reaches a certain point with some patients, right, where it's all the time. I mean, I've had patients who are sending me 3 emails a day or something. That's obviously too much. So what do? First, you set the frame. The frame is typically the office policies. You should outline in your office policies what's appropriate, because it varies by clinicians. It varies by clinicians. I've had patients who genuinely don't know because they've had clinicians who are extremely permissive about this, who were would take their calls all the time, would email a gazillion, respond to a gazillion emails, and that's all fine for someone else, but I can't do that, right? And so I outline in my office policies what's appropriate, which is, hey, a couple of questions here and there are fine, but if it's a more involved clinical question, you have to come for an appointment. Now, if it's starting to be too much with a patient, what I'll do is I will, in my case, it's usually clinical questions over email. I'll answer the question, but then I'll say, here's the answer. Hey, if you have any further questions, let's set up an appointment to discuss. I'm kind of saying this is the last question I'm answering, right? Most of the time, patients get it, and then that's their last question, or they request the appointment. If it happens again, I'll reinforce it. I won't answer the question. I'll say, we need to discuss this during an appointment. Let's set up an appointment to discuss further. Here is my scheduling link. So now it's I can't answer this. Here's the scheduling link. Now, if they keep going, then I'll re-emphasize and enact the consequence. We really need to discuss this during an appointment. I cannot do XYZ, whatever they're expecting, effectively over email. Are you free tomorrow at 10 a.m.? And this is an example where it's not as clear cut as the last example of there being a consequence exactly. It's not like I'm discharging the patient or something, but you can see how the way it's verbalized is gradually getting escalated. Versus what most people do is not say anything, not say anything, not say anything, and then get really frustrated and send like a 2-paragraph email like why you can't email me, you know, like what? And the patient's like, I didn't realize, you know. So I'm gradually escalating it so the patient understands what I mean. There's no resentment, there's no emotional charge. It's just a rational, methodical process. Let me just do a time check. Oh yeah, okay, let me speed up. Now, usually patients who are not a good fit and don't respect your boundaries are going to naturally filter out rather than you needing to discharge them. It has been several years and years since I've actually discharged a patient from my practice. Most patients, when you follow this process, one of two things will happen. They'll filter out on their own. They'll get sick of you and they'll be like, forget this. I'm tired of dealing with this. I'm going to go somewhere else. And that's better because their feelings aren't hurt. They don't like they're annoyed at you. They don't feel hurt by you rejecting them, right? It's a win-win. But more often than not, what I found is actually patients will just shape up. That's why I find it actually really rewarding to sometimes work with patients with personality disorders, because when you can be calm and methodical in your boundaries, patients improve, you know, and it's rewarding working with patients who maybe other providers haven't been able to work with them and you are able to do it effectively. Now, let's say if you formally need to discharge a patient. I'm going to just go over this super quickly because it's covered else, you know, this is not hard information to find via Google search, but you have to give reasonable notice. Typically, that's expected to be 30 days. You have to provide a few referrals. Now, they need not be specific practitioners, and I recommend you're not referring patients that you're really sick of to people you know if you want to stay friends with those people, right? You can just be general. Like, if I'm in LA, I'll say, here's the UCLA access line. 2 is you can call your insurance for a list of providers in network. 3, here is like the LA County access line, for example. You have to offer to transfer medical records. And make sure to document everything and send a formal letter. I send it via email. It might be good to send it via mail. Formally, what people say is you're supposed to send it via certified mail. I personally would not do that. The reason is that I think it's a little bit of a little aggressive, you know, and people get anxious receiving certified mail. If you got a certified letter, you'd probably have some palpitations for a second. I'm not trying to stress anyone out. I'm just trying to be clear. And assuming I've been communicating with this patient over email, I know they're going to get my email. So you might send it as a portal message. Maybe you send it as a follow-up, just regular paper letter, but make sure that they receive it. And your malpractice carrier is your friend here. Like, you can call them and ask them for guidance in these cases. So let me just send a screen share super briefly 2 free resources you're going to get, and we'll drop these in the chat right now. One is my setting boundaries and saying no cheat sheet. It outlines those 4 steps. It also outlines a little bit more, which is inspired from those 2 books I mentioned. And then what was the other one? The sample discharge letter. I actually don't have this pulled up, but we'll drop it in the chat, and it'll also be on the recordings landing page. It's a sample letter that you can use for discharging patients from your practice. Hold on here. I'm going to skip these, but well, I'll say it very briefly. For people in my program, Dream Practice Academy, I coach them through how to set these boundaries with patients. So here's someone who, this is actually an example of a patient with self-adjusting his Adderall. And so I went through and gave her like the verbiage of what she should say to the patient, how she should communicate the boundary. And here's another comment from someone in the program who would have, if he had not, it's a husband-wife team, if they had not been in the program, would have seen a patient that was like bent over backwards to accommodate a patient who wasn't aligned, but because they had the confidence from some of the things I taught, knew to not bend over backwards and just discharge the patient before they even got into the practice. Now let's talk about plugging the holes, addressing administrative inefficiencies. First of all, let's talk about plugging the holes versus fixing the ship. You have a leaking ship. Like, in the short term, you just have to plug some holes, right? But then you have to fix the ship. Plugging the holes is quick fixes for immediate issues. It's like short-term solutions, but you have to like stop the hemorrhaging sometimes, right? Fixing the ship, though, is creating systems to solve problems permanently and long-term. Fixing the ship always takes more time, but you only do it once, right? Most of us in practices, we get stuck plugging holes all day, but you have to be able to take a deep breath, take a step back, and fix the ship. Plugging the hole is constantly reminding patients to update their credit cards manually, versus fixing the ship is automating failed payment follow-up through your billing system. The goal is not just to react, but to create solutions that prevent problems from recurring in the first place. So there are only 3 ways to optimize your business systems, okay? You can eliminate, which is removing the task entirely. You can automate it, which is using technology or software to do it automatically. Or you can delegate it, which is pay someone else to do it. Typically in a practice, that's outsourcing to an assistant. The rule is, though, you don't delegate what you can automate and you don't automate what you can eliminate. Most people jump straight to hiring someone when you could just eliminate the task entirely, like stop doing it, or automate it with a software. Don't hire someone to do something that doesn't need to get done, right? So you have to go through this exercise. First, eliminate everything that can be eliminated, then automate things with software that you can automate. Only then, if you need to, and you probably don't, is to hire an assistant. Let me just give a very brief story about eliminating. In the early days of my practice, I had an after hours line. Now, like, I just thought that I had to, and it was completely never used appropriately. It was never used by what it was intended to, which was like a patient who had a medication side effect over the weekend and had a question about it, so like contacted me. It was always patients just like asking for routine refills because they didn't plan in advance, or sometimes even patients or people who weren't my patient just wanting to reach me faster. And it started causing me extreme amounts of stress. You know, even if I only got 1 call on the weekend, I couldn't relax the whole weekend because I was waiting for someone to call me. And so I was like fretting about this, and I was looking up like hiring pager services and stuff, or hiring a service that would do after hours coverage for me. And I just stopped to think, like, am I actually required to be available after hours? I called my malpractice insurance. I asked them, and they're like, no, as long as your patients aren't expecting it, you do not need to be available. So I was like, oh, so I just created an announcement letter, an email, sent it out, let everyone know I'm no longer available after hours, and got rid of that line. So that would have been really silly for me to pay someone to do that when I could have just got rid of it. And I've never had a negative patient issue from that. What I do is, in the very rare cases, like someone's maybe going to be hospitalized, I'll give that patient my cell phone and I'll say, just text me, or I'll just tell them to send me a message and I'll check my email over the weekend. Now, in my practice, I've eliminated, like I mentioned, after hours phone calls. Phone calls in general. Like a patient calls me, I will email them back because it's too easy for a phone call to turn into like a mini appointment. I've eliminated back and forth with potential new patients who don't realize I'm out of network. I've eliminated extensive email exchanges with patients asking clinical questions. So you can get rid of a lot of stuff. Now, the next step is automation. I could talk for like 3 hours about this, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to talk about one thing. It's really never been a better time to automate administrative tasks in a private practice. The EHRs are so good now. There's so many automations. We have AI. You know, if you're not using an AI scribe, you should be. So that's, well, let me talk about what you can automate. Scheduling and rescheduling, screening and scheduling of potential new patients, billing and payment collection, tracking missed appointments and having patients who miss their appointments getting an automated email reminder to reschedule, and then managing patient communication in terms of having canned email responses and patient portal messages. Oh, and note-taking, AI scribes. So I'm going to just talk extremely briefly about AI scribes. These are the 3 main ones that I know of. There's probably others, but these are the 3 biggies. Heidi, Freed, and Barry's AI, which is psychiatry specific. My recommendation is, if you're not already using one, sign up for trials of a couple of them and test them against each other. That's what I did for about like 2 weeks. I was using both Heidi and Barry's for the same appointments, and then I decided like which one I liked better. I think Barry's is great, and actually know the CEOs there. I met with them. They're really nice. I ultimately settled on Heidi just because I liked it a little bit better. It was a little bit easier for me to customize the templates, but the technology is developing so rapidly, and I feel like every week I'm getting an email from both Barry's and Heidi's about new updates and new features they have. So in 3 months it could totally change, which is the best one, but that's what I use. I'm going to just go over this super briefly because of time, but I pulled up my Heidi. The way it works is that, wait, why does this say resume? Oh yeah, this is an example. I have a view where you can't see my patients' names. This is just an example of a note it generated. And this is based on a template that I created. This is exactly how I want to document. I was reading it earlier. I'm like, it captured things perfectly well, exactly in the mood that I would want. This is exactly the type of mental status exam I want. I don't want 60 things. I just want like a couple of things. When I'm writing notes, my mental status exam is basically unchanged or euthymic. It's like one word. It has risk assessment, and then this is exactly the plan that we discussed. And let me show you, this is another freebie you were giving to people who are in this workshop, is my AI note templates specifically for Heidi. The way you create templates is different. Sorry guys, what did I just do? I messed something up. Sorry, stop share. There we go. The AI templates are different for different AI scribes, but what this has, and I spent a lot of time making this exactly how I would want it, and it's pretty good. I have 4 templates here: a medication progress note, a brief therapy note where you want it to be like kind of just a sentence or two, a detailed therapy note where you want it to be in more detail, and then an intake initial consultation. The amount of time this saves me, like my documentation was always pretty concise, except for the intake appointment. I do go into quite a bit of detail. I think this is like a perfect intake note. It captures things amazingly. This is exactly how I like intake notes phrased. And then currently I have to copy and paste this into my EHR. Heidi is in the middle of creating an integration with Practice Q. Another reason to go with Practice Q. So it's pretty soon you'll just be able to activate Heidi from within Practice Q, and it'll just automatically go into the chart. Okie dokie. Let me just go over very briefly an introduction to Dream Practice Academy. So many of you probably already know about this, my program, but Dream Practice Academy is my flagship mentorship program for building an integrative psychiatry private practice, building or optimizing an existing one. It includes curriculum, consulting, coaching. It teaches all of the frameworks, tools, and resources you need to learn integrative psychiatry and launch/grow/optimize your practice successfully. And you'll join a high-level community of what's now almost 300 people who are building their practices. And again, we work with people who are starting a practice, but I also personally love working with people who already have a practice who are looking to optimize it. And what I showed you with that private practice audit, that's what I personally do with you if you're in one of the higher tiers of the program where you're signing up for that direct coaching with me. I personally am gonna go in, sort, duplicate, create recommendations based on your audit. Let me just show briefly the resources we have in Dream Practice Academy for auditing and optimizing a practice. So we have obviously the private practice audit lesson and worksheet. Some lessons here, some of this is relevant to day 3. I do have a lesson on transitioning from insurance to a cash practice. I have a whole module on setting boundaries and saying no. Again, I just covered it in like 15 minutes here, but it's usually much more involved for people who have issues with this. A lesson on setting boundaries and the power of a positive no. Common boundary issues and how to solve them. How to handle all of these situations. I covered some of these today, but patients who are chronically late, patients who miss appointments, patients who aren't following recommended treatment plan, patients who don't pay, difficult or overbearing family members, or triangulation with the family. How to decline potential new patients. People have so much anxiety about, deep down it's not a good fit. How do you tell the patient? Scripts for how to communicate that. Email script options. Prescribing controlled substances, vacation coverage and taking breaks. How to manage vacation coverage and how to discharge patients for your practice. And then a whole module on advanced business systems. Eliminate, automate, delegate. How to optimize your screening process so you're not getting in those back and forth conversations. How to create standard operating procedures. This is a whole other topic I didn't go into, but it's why I really love some of the more advanced stuff. Corporate structure and minimizing taxes. And then if you do want to work with a virtual assistant, how to find them, how to hire them, how to train them, sample job posting you can use for finding a good person. Okie dokie. Some real life wins. Again, if you're joining Dream Practice Academy with an existing practice, from my standpoint, it's so easy to get you a return on investment. Here's this MP. David actually just published an interview with him on YouTube, who came in, I think he was making $10,000 a month already in his practice when he started. And within 3 months, he was making $30,000 a month, just again, by making some tweaks. Here's someone who came in with, like, she described it as a micro practice. But with some optimization she made, was able to double her hourly rate and double her revenue in the time that we were working together. She's still in the program now. So if you want to discuss your 2025 private practice plan or learn more about Dream Practice Academy, feel free to schedule a call with my team. We're going to drop the link to the landing page that has the recordings on it, is where you can schedule the call. At the bottom, there's a little bit of information about Dream Practice Academy, including the pricing, and then a link. You just have to answer a couple of questions so we have a little bit of a context, then you can schedule the call. You'll meet with either Kate or Carl, two of the members of my team, who talk with members who are considering joining the program, and they can talk with you like a little bit more about how it might apply to your particular situation and go over some more details about how it works and everything. Quick note about scheduling the call. Make sure to put the call on your calendar and then show up. We've had it in the past where people like don't put it on their calendar and forget and miss it. We're all adults here. You would expect a patient that's scheduling with you to like show to the appointment. So my team's time is valuable, so make sure to put it on your calendar and confirm it, like, so that we know that you're coming. And just for a little bit of meta, see what I did there? I said the boundary. It wasn't a big deal, right? I just said, hey, I expect you to show up to the call if you schedule it. And people are going to be more likely to do it. I know from experience because I said it out loud. So your session one bonuses, those 3 bonuses: private practice audit, Google Sheet, setting boundaries and saying no cheat sheet, and those note templates for Heidi AI. Tomorrow is going to be a fun session. We're going to be talking about advanced integrative and actually functional psychiatry. This is going to be the first time I've talked outside of people who are in the paid program about functional psychiatry, what it is, how it works, how it's different from integrative psychiatry, and talking about some of the more advanced functional testing that you can do in private practice. All right, let's hop into Q&A. Oh, you should charge it, and you should never, except for in extenuating circumstances, totally waive it. If someone's like in the hospital, I'll waive it. If someone is sick, I probably am not, because unless you like got sick that morning, like you woke up extremely sick, you can at least say the day before. Now, what I will sometimes do is, here's like a little hack, is waive half of the fee. What this does is allows the patient to, like, you want them to feel a little bit of the sting, or else again, there's no consequence. But it also makes it sound like you're doing them a little bit of a favor, so you get less pushback. So what I'll say usually is, oh, hey, I'll do this often with patients who cancel Monday appointments over the weekend, which I tell them you have to cancel on Friday. I have like 60 reminders, but people miss that a lot. I'll say, hey, just a reminder, you really need to cancel a Monday appointment by Friday. What I'll do this one time is waive half the fee, but just make sure in the future that you're giving, you give enough notice. And then the person's usually like thanking me for waiving half the fee. And even if they're a little annoyed to have to pay anything, it's hard to argue with that, because I gave them a little bit of, like some room. And but if you just totally waive it, you're basically saying one thing but doing another, saying like, yeah, you can miss it, but there's no consequences for it. So I enact it pretty strictly. Yeah. So you do have to file a claim. Now that doesn't mean it's not like a claim goes on your record, but I think it's just a technicality where they can transfer you to the claims person. But you're not saying that there's a problem or that there's a suit or something like that. It's just so that they can transfer you to someone in the department that works with claims. So you just do that. I've done that several times, like probably 3-4 times, where it's like filing a claim, but it doesn't ding you, it doesn't cause any problem, it just allows you to talk to the right person. This is, I could talk about this for a while. Well, like going back, you have to give them 30 days notice. So abandonment is when you discharge someone either in the middle of a crisis, which you can't do, or you're not giving them enough notice. So if you're doing those things and someone says you're abandoning them, what they mean is their feelings are hurt. Now, the way that I manage that is, and it's kind of in the cheat sheet, is tune in with yourself about why you want to discharge this patient. Like what I realized for myself when I had to discharge like a very borderline, like emotionally erratic patient, and I knew she wasn't going to handle it well. And so I was like, how am I going to communicate this? And I just sat with it deep down, and I thought like, why do I want to discharge her? And the reason was, it was taking up so much of my mental energy. I felt like I was not doing as good of a job for my other patients. And when I framed it like that, I was like, that feels like something I can actually just tell her. And I don't recommend beating around the bush. Say you're discharging them, like have it be a phone conversation or like a video appointment. Have it be a video appointment and don't charge them. Like, hey, I want to tell you something. I'm no longer going to be able to work with you in my practice. I would like to explain why. Take a breath and then talk. So that way the sting is off, they know, and then you explain the reasoning in a way that's not about you saying no to them or rejecting them, but about what it is you're saying yes to. And for me, it was saying yes to like being able to give the patients who I've been working with, for a long time, my full attention. And I said to her, I'm like, look, it's not working for me, but let's be honest, I also genuinely don't think this is going to work for you. You're going to pay me a bunch of money, you're going to dedicate a bunch of time, and then but we're not going to make the progress that you deserve to make. And I want you to be able to work with someone where it's genuinely a better fit. The first time I did this, I was like, oh, so anxious. I rehearsed it. I wrote it on a piece of paper, but like, so you should rehearse it the first time you're having a difficult conversation like that, but after it gets much easier. I'll show super quick how I do it on my website, and you can look at my website as an example. First of all, my email address and my phone number are not listed anywhere on my website. Now, you can find them, like it's not too hard to find someone, work phone number. But if you go to visit my practice, you end up on this page. There's a button that says request a consultation. You have to change this. It's like April. I have a bunch of details, including my fees. So people have to like scroll through and see the fees. Then they have to fill out a form. And on the form, they have to check yes, that they're in California. Yes, they've seen my fees. Yes, they're fine with video appointments. Yes, they know I have a wait list. They have to wait a little bit. And sometimes I'll have patients who check all those things, yes, and then still ask me, oh, do you do in person and this and that? But this significantly cuts down on people asking those questions, which for me were like the top questions I was fielding. So you create a form that has the top questions that you get fielded, like you're out of network and all that. I just ask a couple other questions because I like to know, and then this gets sent to your email, and then you can like reply over email, and that way you're not on the phone with someone going on the back and forth. In order to get me on the phone, you have to submit that form, then I'll send you a scheduling link for a phone call. Totally. Like, I'll tell you honestly, I deal with doubt all the time. I know I come across as like a super confident person. In some ways I am. I think it's because I survived cancer, and so just anything else feels like really small in comparison. But it took practice, honestly. It took me being able, like, feeling like a lot of doubt and just continuing forward anyway. I'll tell you what my approach, which is that I do genuinely like my work. Even if I have a hard day, I do, like, for the most part, like it, and remind myself of those positive aspects. I also know how to set boundaries, and I feel confident in my ability to set limits, so I don't feel stuck or resentful. If there's a problem, I know I can solve it. Yes, it may will take 3 to 6 months, but I know I can solve it. I also have a pretty high tolerance for discomfort. Like, if I feel doubt, I won't let it change my behavior, or I'll, like, feel it, I just don't act on it. So I guess I would say practice feeling doubt but not listening to it, right? Like, ask yourself, is this doubt rational? Is it true? Like, is there facts behind it? Is there evidence for it? And 2, is it useful? Does thinking this help me? And if either one of those things is a no, I can allow myself to, like, I can't, sometimes it's hard to shut it off, but I can at least put it on a shelf and continue forward anyway. Just being able to do that, I over time gained a lot of confidence, and that's helped me actually in my clinical care, helping my patients through their own anxieties as well. My system is that I send out a text reminder if people opt in to 2 days before. The reason 2 days before is that I don't want someone getting it 24 hours and then they're canceling. I want them to have time to cancel. And then if some patients are kind of like always a little bit late, but if someone's like 10 minutes late or something, I'm going to send them an email. Hey, I'm on Doxy for our appointment. Here's the link. Hope to see you soon. Sometimes they get that ping and then they show up right away. If they don't, then that's it. They have an email and I wait for them to reply. Oh gosh, so sorry, missed it, this and that. And then we reschedule it. But I don't call them, and I don't have anyone else call them. I send them an email. You could also send them a text, like if you use text in your practice. I just find it's easier to reach people that way than calling them. Currently, no, there isn't. You collect all this great information in Practice Q with your intake forms, and there is no way to auto-populate that into your notes. So what I do is I copy and paste. I actually have an assistant who copies and pastes it for me. Now, I'm sure the intake queue knows that people want that, and they will make that as a feature at some point. But for now, it's copy and paste. I think it's a little bit of a personal decision. In the past, I really lean people toward the cash practice just because that's what I do. I really like it. You do have more flexibility and autonomy, but it does absolutely grow a lot slower. Now, I'm going to go over some of the math of an insurance versus cash practice on Thursday, and sometimes the math's not even that different. Sometimes, like you saw that the private practice audit, sometimes insurance reimbursements could be $500 an hour if you're seeing 2 med management patients. So I do think for a lot of people, starting an insurance practice is actually a reasonable bridge. And maybe you'll keep the insurance practice, or maybe in a couple of years you'll transition it to a cash practice. But I do think it's reasonable. The more that you want to do therapy, the less profitable an insurance practice is going to get. It's when you're doing longer appointments that the reimbursement starts to kind of crater, but still it's going to be more than you're making in a job for sure. I do think we should all be prepared to at least have hybrid practices, meaning that like it's fine now, it was extended to the end of the year, but, and I'm not worried about what was just proposed. Like, I honestly think it'll take them forever to finalize anything. I think it'll keep getting extended. But what I'm more paying attention to is private companies limiting telepsych only practices. Certain pharmacies, Walgreens is notorious for this, not filling certain prescriptions for telepsych only practices, even if you're licensed in that state. Like some malpractice carriers, their doctor's company, not writing new policies for telepsych only practices. Quest even not starting new accounts for telepsych only practices. So I think we can all start telepsych for now at least, but you should be prepared in the back of your head to have an option if you need to have an in-person location, which should probably be someone's office you're subletting. You know, don't go out and rent a full-time office. But I have a plan in the back of my head about what I'll do if I need to start seeing people in person. Let me answer the second one first because it's quick. I haven't yet, but I think I would, because I've seen patients with binge eating disorder, you know, metabolic side effects from medications. Like there's I think going to be psychiatric indications. I've even had patients who started it for weight related issues and it improved their mood, because probably a subset of depression is metabolic dysfunction. Not everyone with depression, it's related metabolic dysfunction, but there probably is at least a subset. So I want to prescribe them. I haven't yet. I don't have to like even look up how you started and the dosing and everything like that. So to answer the second question, I'm going to screen share this fast. So you'll have to like go back on the recording and pause it. But this is in one of my advanced lessons. On creating your standard operating procedures. I have an SOP worksheet, and these are the things. These are basically all the administrative tasks. So this is initial phone call, I do this, but you could be an administrative task. And I have it broken down by new patients, established patients, patients and established patients. And what I do, I'll show this just super briefly because you can see how much I nerd out on this stuff. I use something called Notion. I have all my standard operating procedures outlined, and they're assigned, you can assign it to your assistant. And within each of these, let's say prep new patients charts, I have my whole process outlined, a video like the assistant can watch that shows how to do it, and all the steps, so that you only have to make a standard operating procedure once. Assistants, it's like a high turnover role. Like you're going to have multiple assistants. They turn over quickly. You hire one, it's not the right one. You have to hire another. So the more that you have documented standard operating procedures, the easier it is to onboard someone. You don't have to like reinvent the wheel teaching someone how to do a task. So I have like things documented really well and actually I give those processes to people in my program. I guess first, are you sure you need a fictitious name? This is a kind of a, you only need that if you have well, I don't even know when you would need it. If you have a corporation, you don't need a fictitious name. That's your corporation name. I believe you only need a fictitious name if you're practicing under a brand name that isn't your name and it's not a corporation. You're practicing as a sole proprietor. But you're probably practicing under your name. You know, even though my brand has always been Zen Psychiatry, and I do have a corporation, Zen Psychiatry, but prior to having my corporation, like my billing was all under just my name, Elana Miller, and my name was all over my website. So I guess I would just be 100% sure you need a fictitious name before you go ahead and, because it's like you have to put your name in the newspaper and all this stuff, if it's the same as it is in LA, to get that. So I'll just say this very briefly. It's extremely important. And actually, if you watch back the recordings of the last accelerator, I go into a lot of detail about how to differentiate yourself, how to find your unique selling proposition, and how to communicate that effectively on your website. And I also talk a lot about it in the program. Your website, it's not that people are finding you via your website necessarily, like that is the case in organic search. It's more that however someone gets your name, the next thing they're doing is Googling you. When's the last time you hired someone or paid for someone, especially like a therapist or a psychiatrist, like any kind of provider, and you didn't like go to their website, right? It's the first thing we do. So the more effectively you communicate what you do on your website, it saves you time. You don't have to like explain yourself 1,000 times with patients on the phone, and it helps kind of convert patients into your practice. Awesome. All right. This was a great first night, everyone. I hope everyone has a great evening, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye, everyone. And bye, all of you. I'll see you tomorrow.